Give a couple minutes. So is everybody ready to talk about the buyer's consultation today and the buyer's rep agreement? That will likely take the bulk of our hour. However, if you do have anything else that you want to talk about and you know it now, please let me know or put it in the chat as we go so we can attempt to make time for that. Was there anything else pressing to your immediate business that you need help masterminding with other than our plan today?
I had a question about the do not call list.
Okay.
Does Keller Williams have a do not call list access for us, or do we buy that or order it separately?
So the do not call list is something that you have to do on your own. There
Okay.
is a link in Connect. As a matter of fact, I didn't know that until recently. And hold on, because I actually just emailed it to myself. And I'm going to put this in the toolkit as soon as I get a minute. But in the meantime, I'll put it in the chat for you. So, oops, let me make sure it goes to everyone. There you go. So there is the link for figuring out how to do that. My understanding is you can have up to 5 zip codes at no cost, and I don't know if that's changed. So
As of a couple of days ago, that was still the case.
yeah, but that is something up to each of us to do on our own. But they do provide where to go to get it. Hey, Janet. Okay. Ernie won't be joining us today. He's in the Value Squared seminar. I will be attending the Value Squared seminar in April. I'm also going to highly recommend that anyone who can attends that. It was talked about at Family Reunion. It's going to go along with what we're talking about today. And after my whole team of coaches, we are going to attend it. There's 4 different dates. The one in April, or one of them in April, is what fit into my calendar. Once the team attends those, we will be bringing additional information back to you as well. And it will enhance and improve on the conversation that we're going to have today. So if anyone can attend that, I highly recommend it. They have 3 more after today. We have Jay Papasan and Jason Abrams will actually be facilitating that. So it will be a pretty amazing class. So I'm going on, just in case anyone wants to join at the same time, where's my date? I'm going on April 10th. So I was going to go today, but I didn't want to not do this for you guys. So I'm doing a later one. All righty. So let's go ahead and get started, and hopefully we'll have some people join in. Again, like always, if something comes up that pertains to the discussion, we'll just chime right in. If the discussion brings up something you want to mastermind outside of the discussion, put it in the chat so that I can see it and attempt to make time for that before we're done, okay? All right, so let's dive in with buyer consultation. So first of all, let me come from curiosity and ask you as a group, what do you understand the buyer consultation to be, and how important do you think it actually is? Don't be shy. Rick?
I think it's the most important thing to weeding out buyers that aren't ready to go. I mean, for me, it's a very important tool, and it allows you to find out where they're at in the process to know where you need to be to best serve them.
Okay. Amanda?
Up until this point, I kind of mixed the buyer qualification with the buyer consultation. And as I was doing the training, I realized that maybe what Rick is talking about, figuring out whether they're ready, willing, and able, and just to make sure if they're an A, B, or C buyer, that's what the pre-qualification questions are for. And then once that's figured out, then having the consultation is where you explain the process to them, and you sign hopefully the buyer broker agreement, and then and then basically the home buying process begins. That's my understanding.
Yes. Anyone else have different thoughts or ideas, or had different thoughts or ideas? Okay, or just doesn't want to admit it. Okay, so that is correct. So we're not going to spend time on buyer qualifying today because of time's sake and because we've talked about that so many times, but I do want to reiterate that is step one, right, in the buying process. And the buyer qualification questions that both of you talked about, those are so important toward getting to the client's motivation and whether or not they're truly ready, willing, and able right now. Whether it should be somebody we're actually setting the buyer consultation appointment with, or we should be nurturing them to have that consultation at a later time. Okay, here's what happens, particularly with new agents. And it doesn't matter. Any agent gets into this trap, and we have to make sure we don't get into this trap because it will waste our time. Okay. So many times somebody gets a hold of you, or you call them and they say, "Oh, yeah, I'd like to buy a house." Okay. They say it in numerous ways, but for sake of argument, right? And we're all, "Oh, great. I'd love to help you. What is it that you're looking for?" "Oh, I'd love to go show you some houses. Let me prepare a list of houses for you, send it over to you. You can tell me which ones you want to see and we'll go see them." That's what a lot of agents do. What do we miss if we do it that way?
The
It's a huge
agreement?
mistake. You're wasting all kinds of time. I've done it. Most new agents seem to do it because they want to do a good job and they just get going, and then you realize you just wasted 3 or 4 days out of your, it depends, but you can waste a lot of time on that. And it's more valuable to figure out what's going on right off the top of the bat. So
Absolutely. And I heard you say the agreement. That's a big thing that we're missing. We also have no idea if they're even ready, willing, or able. Did we ask if they've been pre-qualified by a lender? Do we even know? Right? So it is so important that step number one is the qualifying questions. Too many people want to go from 0 to 60 and kill the car, right? If you go from first gear to fifth gear, you're going to kill your car. You got to do it step by step. Okay. It's so important. So when we get to the point from the qualifying conversation and we determine that they are ready, willing, and able, all three of those now within, say, 2 to 3 weeks, then we set a buyer consultation appointment. It is separate from your conversation about qualifying them. Now, does that mean you can't do them at the same time? No. If they're ready, willing, and able, you happen to be in person or you're on Zoom, you can do them at the same time. Do not go into the buyer consultation before finishing the qualifying conversation. Okay. But ideally, the conversation's probably going to take place over the phone or at a coffee shop or some kind of a more of a incidental conversation, or maybe it's a not incidental, it's an intentional, but it's a shorter conversation that didn't mean to go long, right? So you're going to set that appointment to go into the buyer consultation. Remember, we've used the example before of a surgeon. We don't go into the doctor with a pain and he doesn't just cut us open without asking us some questions. Okay. So now the stage is set. We're at the buyer consultation. So there are at least 7 things that we should accomplish. Some could say 6 because some could be together, but I'm going to say there's 7 things that we should accomplish in a buyer consultation. Who can tell me what they are? And just one at a time. You don't have to know all 7. What are they?
find out if they're approved for a loan or if they're paying cash.
That's one of them. And they don't have to be in any particular order, by the way. That's definitely one.
Their motivation, like how motivated they are to make this happen.
Okay.
Mhm.
Ideally, that was done at the qualifying question.
Oh,
So
okay.
if we're
Yeah.
at this point, they should be motivated for sure.
Okay.
Is that, oh, well, never mind. I was thinking like the buyer consultation package. I don't know if that's correct.
Well, if you're using a buyer consultation package, which you don't have to and you can, and if you are, these 7 things should be in that. And that would be kind of like your guide of the conversation.
Oh, okay.
Our value.
Okay, yeah, you can definitely put across your value. What else?
Timeline.
Okay,
Have them actually sign the BRBC.
yes. You guys need some help? Okay. So one of the things, and this is kind of, they don't have to go in a particular order. And as you do them and have these conversations, you'll find the way that it's most comfortable for you. But what you want to start off with is, of course, after welcoming them and thanking them for meeting with you, one of the things that you want to do is explain the market conditions. Okay, because if they don't understand how the market works, they may feel you're trying to push them into doing something just to get a commission. So particularly in our current market, now, if you're watching this recording and it is a year from March 7th, 2024, we may be in a different market. I'm talking about today, okay? If you're in the current market that we're in and you don't explain to the buyer that when they find the house that they are in love with and really want, that they need to move quickly, because if it's priced right and in good condition, there likely will be multiple offers on it and they'll be competing for that house. So it's important that they come in as strong as possible in their offer and that they act quickly. They don't have a lot of time to think about this. Okay. But if you don't set that expectation at the buyer consultation and you go out and show property and they find the house you want, and now suddenly you start saying, oh, okay, well, we got to write an offer now and you got to make it, your highest and best, because they're going to think you're just trying to push them into doing something. And that's not being a fiduciary, right? So it's important that we always explain the current market conditions and why we need to act a certain way when they're ready to make an offer. Get it?
Jodi,
Uh-huh.
isn't that also very important to explain them the reason why they have to sign the agreement?
Yes, and we're getting there.
Okay.
We're getting there. But there's several steps that we're going to do in this consultation before we get to the agreement. All of them are going to lead up to that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then the next thing we need to do is we need to find out if we haven't already in the qualifying conversation, because the answer at that point might have been no, right? And then we're getting them connected to a lender. We need to know if they've been pre-approved. If they've not been pre-approved at this point, you could even switch gears and pull up your laptop and pull up the lender site and have them do the application right there in your consultation. Or you can just connect them to the lender. However it works best for the client. Okay, but we do need to make sure that they've been pre-approved, unless you already know that from the qualifying conversation. The other thing that we have to make sure of is that we have to set expectations. There's at least 3 different ways or types of expectations that we're setting. We've already talked about one, and that's the market conditions, right? But the other expectations is we have to explain your agency relationships, right? What you do and why it's important to use you. Remember, there are other options out there for buyers. There are FSBOs. right? They may walk into an open house that another agent is doing. They may go to a new construction site. Now, if you don't explain to them how this works, you may lose them as a buyer. So you need to explain to them that, Mr. Buyer, if you see a FSBO or a for sale by owner, right, that you're interested in, please call me and I'll reach out to the seller and find out the information for you and see if we can get you to see the property, right? Not to contact them themselves, right? Because now they're going to get themselves in a situation where they have no protection. Okay. Rick?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and I kind of know the answer, but I think it might be worth talking about. And what do we say if they say, oh, you're just trying to push to get the commission is why you're doing this? What do we tell them?
Well, that could be something that you handle in objections, but at the same hand, it would be like, well, we are meeting because you're hiring me to find you the right home at the least price and the shortest or with the least amount of hassle, right?
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. Well, when it comes to for sale by owners, if they're not represented by an agent, I'm here representing you to make sure everything is done legally and properly so there's no problems for you. Because if they
Okay.
try to represent themselves, that may not happen.
Yeah.
Okay, the other expectation to set is around open houses. Now, you guys all know I'm not a huge fan of business cards, right? For various reasons, and I'm not against them either. This is one time that it is beneficial to have actual physical business cards because you can give your client at the buyer consultation a small stack of your business cards and let them know if you should visit an open house without me, make sure that you give the agent there my card and let them know that we're working together. And then I'll be happy to reach out and get any information for you. So that is a good use of business cards. Okay. It also helps your client not feel uncomfortable about saying that they're working with you. They can stand up for you because they have a tool to do that. Okay. The other expectation, and this is really important, and one all of you may not be aware of, is new construction. Okay, so new construction, it's incredibly important that you are letting your client know that if you ever want to visit a new construction site, please let me know because I must accompany you the first time you go in order to be able to represent you. If I don't accompany you, I may not be able to represent you, and then you will be at the mercy of the builder. So it is incredibly important for you guys to know that the very first time your client goes to a new construction subdivision, you need to go with them and you need to register them. Many of them will not allow you to register on the phone. You must actually go. And here's the thing, this is a side point, okay? This is for your information on new construction. New construction will probably be the easiest deal you'll ever do because you'll do next to nothing. However, you have to go with them, you have to register, but you should be there, for instance, when they're picking options. Now, you don't have to be there if you talk to them beforehand and give them a heads up on some things, and you can be there to help them along the way. And a for instance is, most new construction homes come with primer paint as the paint for the walls. And what happens is your client goes in and they see the models and the models look amazing, right? But the house they're going to get doesn't look anything like the model, even if it's the exact same floor plan. So they have to understand that if they add paint, that's a cost. And if they add 2 colors of paint, that's an even larger cost. And if they were to have their own painter come in and paint the house prior to moving in, it will probably save them at least half, if not more, and they're not financing it for 30 years, if they can afford to do it that way. So it's things like this where you can come into play to help, because the builder is represented by the agent at the subdivision. They don't care about you and your client. They want to have the client pay and add as many options as possible to add as much to the price as possible. Okay. Another very simple thing is a garage door opener. You can go to Home Depot and get a garage door opener for probably under $200. Well, they're going to charge you $500, $750 or something for a garage door opener. A lot of people can install them themselves. So it's just these little things in new construction that you can help your client with that the subdivision is definitely not going to be helping them with. Okay. Something else to be aware of is there will be times, and we've had it happen. I can't remember if it was Lori that had it happen, but we've had times where things come up and the builders try to pull one over, so to speak, on the client, and you can be there to intervene and protect your client and negotiate for them, because they'll try to make something sound like it's a have to when it's not. And then of course, like final walkthroughs and things, you can be there for those, and you should be there for those if, and it's a big if, you're allowed to be. Sometimes the builders don't allow you to be, but you can fight for that. Okay, so there are a lot of reasons that it's beneficial for your client to have you represent them, even in a new home construction. And while it'll be the easiest commission you'll ever collect, because you'll feel like you're not doing anything, you can still be communicating with your client and adding value. Okay, did you have a question, John?
Yeah, I had a question on new builds. Where, like, this is all incredibly valuable information and stuff that I never would have thought about as a new agent. Is there a resource of things we should watch out for new builds, or have you done training, or do you have more information on that?
It's not something we talk about a lot of times, to be honest. We don't have anything specific, but it is something to be aware of. And that's why, like at times like these, I take a minute and take a side turn to
Okay.
go through that. And when you do have certain circumstances come up, don't forget, you can always come to Ask a Coach or reach out to the coaches, right? So if you ever get yourself in a situation that you're unsure of, or what should I know, just reach out to us. Because here's the thing. And now that you've said that, and Melissa, I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Send me an email.
Okay.
New construction help. Okay. You don't even have to put anything in the body, just the subject line. I'm not going to promise to have that done before the end of the month, because I'm working on some other projects, but I'll add something into the toolkit that'll help with you. Here's the thing. There is so much to learn that we can't remember to tell you everything under the sun until things come up sometimes. That's something we don't have, and none of the market centers really have, but we'll create at least a basic thing for you.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so that's the expectation setting around, the agency relationship and working with them, and what your client should be aware of, and what you need to make your clients aware of. Okay.
Jodi,
Yes.
just a question regarding the constructors. So should we call in advance and ask them if they have if they agree to work with an agent and pay the proper fee, let's say?
You can call and ask, but you're going to have to likely accompany your client to the subdivision for their first visit. And then that's where you would actually sign a referral agreement. And to get paid from a subdivision, sometimes they do a commission agreement, but most of the times they do a referral agreement. The referral agreement, though, is whatever commission they agree to pay. It's anywhere from 1% to 3%, depending on the builder. I've seen them as low as 1%. I've seen them as higher than 3%, depending on when they're offering incentives. So each builder is different. There's usually not much negotiation there. That's just because builders set their fees, and that's what it is. It's not to say you can't ask, though, right? Okay, so the next thing would be to go over their actual needs and wants. So what is it that they're looking for? This is where you have that conversation. How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? Do you want a fireplace? Do you want a pool? Square footage, big backyard, small backyard, right? Ask questions around that. What's a big backyard to them? What's a deal breaker? What do you absolutely do not want in a house? You're not even going to go look at it, right? What's something that you don't really care for, but you could live with because you could fix it later? Find those things out, right? And then you're going to set them up on your auto prospecting through the MLS so that every day you can set it up daily, weekly, or as it comes on the market in the minute for them to be emailed when these properties that fall into their specifications come up. Now, here's a really important side note for you guys as agents when it comes to setting up your auto prospecting. Okay. Pay attention to what the client is saying. Okay. And the biggest thing to pay attention to is, let's just say you have a client and they're approved for $1 million, but they have told you specifically, I do not want to pay over $850,000. Do not send them properties over $850,000 just because they're qualified. That is the quickest way to get fired from a client because they think you're trying to make a better commission. Pay attention to what they want and what they need. It doesn't matter what they're qualified for if that's not what they want. Okay. Now, the other caution to that is, let's say they don't want to pay over $850,000. In today's market, I wouldn't send them properties over $800,000. And I would explain why. Because if you send all the way up to $850 and they don't want to go over $850, there is no negotiation room for them if they need to offer more to compete against multiple offers. Now, if after losing out on offers and having these conversations, you can ask them, would you like me to increase the amount of the homes that we're showing you based on what's been happening? But confirm that you heard they didn't want to go over that amount. Right? Amanda?
It is related to what you said, but it might be a topic for a different discussion. I just wanted to bring it up. When buyers put in their best and strongest offer, and that's our best interest to let them know that in order for them to get the house, that's what they need to do. Is it always about offering? What is it about? Is it about matching the listing price? Is it going over the listing price? Is it does it have anything to do with financing? Do all cash offers, are they always going to top the ones that need a mortgage involved? So this is my question.
Okay, so I'm going to write that down because that is a great question and it's a little off topic. And I don't want to go down a rabbit hole too far where we don't cover today's topic. Okay. But we'll put a pin in that and I will answer that question for you. Okay. Because it is about many different things, not necessarily one thing, and it's entirely depends on your client. Okay. Okay. So, the other thing about finding their wants and needs and setting some expectations is, say they want wood floor, or they don't want carpet in the bedroom, or whatever thing, right? Maybe they want granite countertops. You need to let them know that some of the listings you send them may have a tile countertop or might have carpet in the bedroom. It's not that you didn't hear them. It's that if you were to go in the MLS and check off all those boxes so that it doesn't send those, you're going to miss out a lot, because the only way that works is if the agent that input the listing checks all the proper boxes. Most agents don't. And so if you narrow it down too far, you'll never see all the listings that come up. Okay. So, but you want them to understand that you heard that. And so when we look at the listings, let's look at the pictures, right? Who knows? Maybe they don't want carpet in the bedroom, but it's the perfect house. Otherwise, they're willing to take the carpet and rip it out when they get the house, right? So just let them know that you acknowledge and why they may see some things a little outside of what you talked about. But things like, does it have a pool or not, the price, those things you can avoid sending. Okay. Okay. So wants and needs. And then it's incredibly important that you set expectations around working together. Now, here's where you guys have to be professional, and you have to remind the clients that you are not available 24/7. Okay? You're going to have agents out there, and you're going to have very seasoned agents that do a lot of business that are going to say you should answer your phone at 10 o'clock at night. And I'm going to tell you that's a bunch of garbage. Do not answer your phone at 10 o'clock at night unless you want to be the agent that always works at 10 o'clock at night and never has a life and will be out of this business in 5 years because you have run yourself ragged. Okay. Just like any business, they have general operating hours. So you have to figure out what yours are personally. There's no right or wrong. It's what fits into your schedule. So when are you turning your phone off at night? 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock? I'd push back if you're leaving it on past 8 o'clock personally, but that's a personal decision. Okay. When do you start returning calls in the morning? 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., maybe 11 a.m., because you're not even going to return calls till you've done your lead generation. Okay. Set the expectation. Let them know. When I was practicing real estate regularly and my kids were younger, I told people I did not work on Sunday. I didn't return calls, texts, or anything else. We didn't really text much back then. Because that was the one day a week my kids knew mommy wasn't tied to her phone or pager or whatever else was there that time, that I was fully focused on them. And so my clients respected me for that. I never lost a client over it, and neither will you. So you need to set those expectations, and in setting them, make sure you assure them that they are important to you and that you're going to give 100% and do your best for them. But you also have a family and a life, and you will be spending time with them as well. Okay. And even, I don't know everybody's situations, even if you don't have a family that lives with you, but you have a dog or a cat or just a pillow you want to hug. Okay. It doesn't matter what it is. Set expectations. Okay. Start that immediately. Don't get into bad habits from the get-go. Okay. Also, in setting those expectations, let people make sure people understand that while I may not be able to answer your call immediately or return a text or an email immediately, it's important to me, and I will within a reasonable amount of time. I will always return all emails, calls after business hours early the next day, or things that happened early in the day before I quit for the day, right? Because if you're in an appointment, you're not going to answer your phone. If you're in a class like this, you shouldn't be answering your phone, right? So there's times that we're not going to answer our phone. And if you answer the phone every single time a client calls you, and if you text right back, excuse me, or email right back, they're going to think you're going to do that all the time. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't if you can, but don't stress out if you can't. Does that make sense? Okay. And then, of course, the final step would be to get the BRBC signed, the Buyer's Representation Broker Compensation Agreement. So after going through all of these things, it's just going to be as simple as, okay, Mr. Buyer, have I answered all of your questions? Do you have any more questions for me? No. Okay, great. All we need to do to put me to work for you is have you sign this buyer's agreement, and then I can go to work for you. That's simple. Okay. We're going to go over in a minute some ways that you can present it and some objection handlers. Okay. And then of course you want to ask for referrals. By the way, before we go, do you know of anyone else that's thinking about buying or selling a home that might be able to use my help? Always ask at all the high points for referrals. Okay, that is a buyer consultation in a nutshell. All of those things should be accomplished at the buyer consultation. And it should roughly take 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the person and the questions. Okay, so before we move on to the buyer's representation agreement, any questions? Okay, so there's 3 more things I want to accomplish before we're done today. One is I'm gonna point out a couple of things on the buyer representation agreement. We're not gonna go through all of it. We simply don't have time. You guys can read it, okay? And we do have contracts classes, but there are a couple things with the new conversations that I want you to know about so that you can point them out and explain your buyer representation agreement as needed to people, okay? And then we're going to go over some things that I have actually put in the toolkit, some things that you can use to say to have them sign it, also if some objections come up. So let me go ahead and share the screen. And so this is the actual buyer representation agreement. As mentioned before, there's several pages ahead of it, right? The agency relationship, electronic fire or fraud advisory, all of that. You can use that and you don't have to. That has to be done before writing an offer. But really the agency agreement determines, or the agency disclosure, I should say, is something that has to be presented. Okay, this is pretty self-explanatory, right? But remember, you have to put your start date on here, okay? And you have to put the ending date. It could be number of days or whatever. I recommend a minimum of 6 months, could be a year, depends on the conversation you had with the buyer. There's reasons you would put less, and we can talk about that when we go over objections, okay? You do want to put a location in here. So cities, if they're looking in a particular city, I'm just going to use Visalia as an example because that's where I live. I would put Visalia, Tulare, Exeter, Hanford, because they're all my surrounding cities in case they find something in that area. Or you could also check this box here and put counties. So if here, I live in Tulare County, but they very likely could buy in my neighboring county, Kings County, right? So if you live in an area where you have neighboring counties, particularly those of you in West Ventura County, you might be LA County or Ventura County, depending on what side of Oak Park you're in. So, or Westlake Village. So keep that in mind. You should put something in here. We used to say put TBD so that it left it open, whatever they chose. Our brokers are recommending that we do put an area in here now because, for instance, a buyer could be working with me in Visalia and with Rick in Paso Robles, right? They don't have to work with me all over the state. They could be working with multiple agents in different cities for different reasons, okay? The other thing is putting your price range in here. So you are going to want to put your price range. So you're going to want to put probably based on your conversation, something substantially less than they're talking about and a little bit more than they're probably qualified for. Okay, so you do want to put that information in here. Now, here's a couple things that I want to point out. Right here, compensation to brokers. And this is important conversation to have, particularly if they ask, well, I thought the seller paid that, okay? We are now recommending that you write in an amount that they will pay you to represent them. Probably what I would put in for my services is 3%. Now, I can't tell you what to put in because that is negotiable. And I would put in 3%. Okay. So the buyer agrees to pay broker as follows, whatever percent here. Then down here, you're going to check the exclusive box. Okay. And then I would put in here 30 days. It automatically defaults to 30 days with number 2 checked, but just as a protection. The other thing to note is right here, because this is where a buyer will say, oh, but you mean I have to pay you that? I thought the seller paid that. So here's where you point out, right? Oops, nope, that's highlighting too much. Point this out right here. If anyone other than buyer compensates broker for services covered by this agreement, the amount shall be credited toward buyer's obligation to pay commission. So if you've chosen to put in 3% and the seller is paying 3%, the buyer's paying 0. If you've chosen to put in 3% and the buyer's or the seller side offers 2.5%, personally, I'd call it good, and I wouldn't have the buyer pay me anymore. I might even put something in to the effect of definitely in conversation, but you could even put in writing. You could put here the lowest you're willing to accept without the buyer paying you. Okay. Because the bottom line is, if you get 2.5% from the seller and you've asked for 3 from the buyer, are we really going to go after him for it? I don't think so. Okay. So that is where the buyer's protection is right here. So even though you're putting a price up here, you need to let them know that they are protected from paying that as long as the seller is offering a commission. So right there is what you can point out to make them comfortable. Make sense?
Yep.
Yes, sorry, just a quick question. So what if the seller doesn't pay the buyer's agent? So before writing an offer, obviously, for a house, that's something that would need to be discussed, correct? And
Right.
then what if the buyer feels that they don't actually want to pay their agent, even though it might happen? And then the seller doesn't want to pay the agent, then what happens?
Okay, so that's where using this protects you, right? So first of all, it's required in the MLSs, it has to be disclosed how much the seller is offering to the buyer side. Even if it's 0, it has to be put in there. So you will know before writing an offer what they're offering. So then when you go to write an offer, you will have that conversation with your buyer. Okay, Mr. Buyer, this particular seller is not offering anything for compensation, so I need you to understand that you will be responsible for paying the buyer's commission fees. In which case, that would become a part of their closing costs that they would put into escrow before closing. Okay, but that conversation would need to be had before writing the offer, so they fully understand this is the rare instance where you are responsible for this. Okay. But then also let them know, okay, Mr. Buyer, the seller is compensating 2.5%, 3%, whatever it is. And so therefore you will owe nothing as far as commission fees go. Rick, did you have a question?
Yeah, it just seems like common sense. I wish they could just leave it alone, but obviously they're not going to. This is going to push a lot of buyers out of the market if they have to do it. So my question is, I guess, if we get to this point and then all of a sudden the seller's not paying for it and the buyer has to come up with whatever, and it pushes them over their limit for the loan. I mean, I guess it's not really a question there. I guess it's done. So.
Well, it just goes to, there isn't an agent on the planet probably that's going to represent a buyer for 0. Okay. You're opening yourself up to legalities. You have to be paid compensation. A broker isn't going to allow you to represent a buyer for 0.
Right.
Okay. So whether the seller pays anything or not, most brokerages have a minimum amount that each agent must be paid. And you'd have to check with your local brokerage. A lot of them are at least 2% per side. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So check with your local brokerage on that though. So here's the thing. That's why the conversation has to be had if the compensation being offered to the buyer side isn't sufficient for you. You have to have that conversation with the buyer before writing the offer, and they choose whether or not to write the offer. Because they're not going to be able to go to another agent and get them to write an offer for zero either. Okay. So it's not like you're going to lose the buyer. It just might be the house they choose to write an offer on.
Jodi, let me interrupt you really quick to add this to the conversation. What is there a new etiquette or a new unspoken thing about a listing agent and what they are doing? Because I've seen, and I don't know if you guys have all seen this, that it used to be a standard 2.5% here for the buyer's agent on the Central Coast. There's a lot of 2% now. Do you know if listing agents are lowering their commission, or are they just giving less to the buyer's agent? Is there something we should know as listing agents as well on this particular matter?
Okay, so good question, and I'll answer it briefly so we don't go too far down a rabbit hole, because we can talk a lot more about that next week when we go over the listing presentation and agreement. So first of all, let's be super careful and not use words like standard or typical, because that's kind of what got us into some of this trouble to begin with. So what an agent chooses to charge is their choice. I personally, when I take a listing, charge 6% for my fee because I'm a full service agent. And in doing that, I am giving half of that to the buyer side. Now, you could approach it. My fee is 3% or whatever your fee is, right? I'm talking what my fee is. I'm not telling you what yours has to be. My fee is 3%. And so now, Mr. Seller, what do you want to offer the other side, right? So here's the thing though, we have to get really good with our conversations. I wouldn't start saying my fee for the listing side is this. I would say my total fee is this, and I give half to the other side, right? Because the truth is, if a seller wants to sell their house, the other agent has to be compensated. So it's really in their best interest to offer compensation to the other side. So what's going to happen is, first of all, here's what I want everybody to understand. Yes, we're starting to see some changes. Yes, sellers are starting to ask more questions about this because of all of the news about the lawsuits. Okay, that is happening, and it's not going to change our business to a drastic degree. We keep doing business as normal. Okay. And what's going to change is we have to get better at articulating our value as a buyer's agent, as a seller's agent, and why we charge a particular fee and what happens to that fee. What do we do with that fee? And why do we do that? Does that make sense? Did that make sense, Autumn?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I was on mute. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Like I said, I wasn't sure if there was, I don't know. Like I said, I've just read and heard things like what Silicon Valley is doing and things like that. So I just wasn't sure if there had been, and it might be specific to my brokerage as well. I know we as agents in general have to have a certain percentage through our brokerage, or else get it approved if we're under that percentage.
Right.
So I was just wondering if there was something on the listing side as well, because like I said, I have noticed quite a few different buyer compensation payment, quite a few. So just like I said, I was just curious as to if we're still charging our X% and then just lowering the buyer's compensation. And that's kind of what my question was, are you still getting 6% and giving only 2%?
I personally would never do that. And I personally feel that an agent that does that is not a fiduciary. And I could so get on a soapbox on that one. I won't.
Okay.
But here's the thing. My opinion, and it's not even totally an opinion. what I believe to be a fiduciary responsibility to your client is if you are a listing agent, you charge X% and you give half of that to the buyer side. And what happens is, and I got to be careful, we got a couple more things to cover. Oh, you got me on a soapbox on them. What happens is agents, especially in a market where things are slower, agents get greedy. Agents are probably still charging whatever they have been charging, depending on the area, 5, 6, whatever percent, right? And they're reducing the amount they give. I saw for a long time where certain teams in my area were charging 6% and only offering 2.5% to the buyer side because they decided to hire all this admin that they had to pay for. Well, if you decide to hire admin, you better figure out how to pay it and still be a fiduciary, in my opinion. Now, people can do business however they want, so I'm not judging, but we need to be a fiduciary. So if you're seeing 2% on something, I expect that listing agreement to say 4%. That's the way it should be to be a fiduciary. Does everybody do it that way? No. Should you? Yes.
Understood.
Let me get down off my soapbox now. I actually pretty proud of myself. I didn't get on it too long. Again, please understand, if you know of somebody practicing this, I'm not judging anybody. It's just we need to do the best for our clients. Okay? Being a fiduciary is putting their needs ahead of everything else, including our own. And unfortunately, many do not do that. And they don't look at it that way, unfortunately. So, okay, let's real quick. Now I'll share them on screen, but these are in your PC toolkit now. I put them in there this morning. I added some conversation helpers for you. So this is just a few little things you could say or something to this effect in your own words to present the buyer representation agreement to get it signed. Simply as it's our policy to have you consent to representing you as your agent before we start looking at homes. By signing this, you're agreeing to that. Okay. I'm required to have an agreement between us to be able to act as your agent and show you homes. I just need your signature to get started. By signing this agreement, you're authorizing me to represent you and look out for your best interest throughout the home buying process. In order for me to help you without possible conflicts of interest, protect your confidentiality, and operate in your best interest, I'm required to have you sign this agreement to represent you as an agent. Now, that is a true statement, by the way. If you have an agreement signed, you are bound by confidentiality. If you don't have an agreement signed, there is no bounding of confidentiality. My broker requires that I have my buyer sign this agreement so I can go to work for you and be on your side. We do not care if the coaches, the brokers throw us under the bus. We don't care. It's not throwing us under the bus. We're telling you to get this done. It's required. So any one of those that works for you. Now let's just say you have an objection to getting this signed. Here's a few things that you could say. Well, typically, if a buyer's uncertain about signing this agreement, it usually means I haven't answered all their questions or there's something they haven't told me. Was there something else you wanted to cover today or that I forgot to ask you? Notice the silence there? So one thing that we've said this before, but I'm going to caution again, when we use objections. So it's so interesting in my cadre group this morning, one of the coaches that was able to attend a particular listing class at family reunion by a top listing person who did like, I don't know how many hundreds of listings that year, is that 54% of agents handle objections with a question, which means that half of us are not handling objections correctly. we really should be asking a question in handling objections, because oftentimes the objection isn't really the objection. Just like this one says, right? Is there something I haven't covered? Most of us just tend to start talking really fast in hopes of just it going away. Or we say the objection handler and then we go into 5,000 reasons why they should sign with us, and then we lose them, right? So let's not think of these as objections and think of them as opportunities. Opportunities for clarification. Okay. So, or you can simply say, well, what is it that concerns you about signing this? Right? Signing this agreement is actually our policy, since I can't be 100% committed to you unless you're 100% committed to me representing your best interests. True statement, right? I sense a little apprehension. I'll tell you what, if we get to the point in the process where you don't like working with me, then I won't have a problem ending your agreement. I just ask that you let me know as soon as possible. How does that sound? Or here's what we can do. We can make it for 30 days. Oops, there's a typo. In the 30 days, I'm confident that one of two things will happen. One, we'll have either found your dream home, or two, I'll have proven my value to you such that you'll be ready to extend this agreement. Does that sound fair? Okay, so these are in the PC toolkit. So when you have a buyer consultation coming up, I encourage you to pull those out, practice those in your conversation practice. Amanda?
I have a specific pickle that I'd like you to I got myself in. I was texting with my buyer, and we went through the buyer pre-qualification questions over the phone. She spoke to my lender. She told me that she's ready to buy in this summer. But after, I think it was last week, in the training, it was kind of stressed that it's very important to have that signed, the BRBC signed. So I tried to reach her and using what I've learned in the training, but we ended up texting, and I approached this via text. We were texting, it was going well. And then when I texted her about signing the buyer broker, radio silence. And so because it's not a live conversation, I'm not really sure how to translate what you've just said into a text. How would you solve this, Pickle?
Well, one, I wouldn't try to get it signed via text.
I know. After I sent the text, I realized this is not the way to do this. However, I'm in the situation right now. And is there any way to remedy it and how I can move forward from this?
Well, I would try to set an appointment to have a conversation with her, because really, so have you had an actual buyer consultation with her?
No, we just had the pre-qualification.
Okay. So then if you're not at the point of that, then maybe it's a little too early to even broach that, right? So the goal of the buyer consultation is to get this signed.
Okay.
So if you're not even at the buyer consultation phase yet, it might be a little early, and it might not, depends on your conversation with her. But I would, as it gets a little closer, I would be well, what's the time frame you said, this summer?
Summer, yes.
What's the definition of summer?
That's the closest she could give me. I think they're waiting for the financial situation to solve itself, because they're probably going to use a VA loan, and so it's a little bit complicated, and she's waiting on funds, and she just said summer.
Okay. So I would definitely, when possible, figure out what summer is, right? June, July, August, we don't know, right? But the point is, because now at this point, I would give it a little bit of time and then reach out to her by phone. Or you could text her just to see how she's doing, just kind of maybe drop it for now. Because you really should do the buyer consultation first, because the buyer consultation is where you're showing your value. So if you haven't shown that value to her yet, and you haven't had those conversations, it's probably too early to ask her to sign it.
Yes, I kind of mixed the two together before clearly understanding the goal of each. So this was a little bit, way back. So I've already set her up on the automated MLS email. So I kind of combined intuitively, I combined the two things. But now that I understand what is the purpose for each, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
drop it and then reach out in a few weeks.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I'd give it, a 3 or 4 weeks, reach out again, wait for a one of the houses that looks like it matches her to come up and just reach out and say, "Hey, have you been getting the houses that I've been sending you?" kind of a thing.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, everybody, it's 1 o'clock. So next week we are going to pick up with the listing appointment and the listing agreement and go over that. If we have time, we'll talk about the offers. But you're not at that stage yet, so it's putting it off isn't going to hurt too much. You can go to and ask a coach, Amanda, if you need an answer quicker on that, and we will address it though. I'm making notes. Okay. Have a good one.